It's an important year for Kevin Stefonski, Deshaun Watson, and the Cleveland Browns. Do they have enough on this roster for a playoff run and being competitive in the AFC? It's Browns Day, and we're breaking them down from every angle today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single show, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, and when you enter promo code LockedOnNFL, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Kyle, what's up, man?
Joe, happy National No Free Advertising Day to you. I just swapped out my can for my Birddogs didn't come yet. So instead, I get the Locked On thermos here.
Yeah.
No more free advertising for my caffeine beverages of choice. So cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to Birddogs. Cheers to the Browns. Cheers to the Cowboys YouTube video didn't pop off versus some of the other standards that we have had. But I don't know if you went and read the comments. Every single comment was an everydayer.
Thank you for those people.
It was like it was good to hear Nick Saban back on the podcast because of the soundbite, the soundboard. I forget what the other ones were, but there were a couple of really funny, like, oh, okay, these are everydayers leaving comments here on YouTube today.
You know what's funny is I feel like San Francisco and Dallas on YouTube just didn't pop off.
San Francisco laid the biggest egg of all time.
Well, it's almost like these big like legacy teams. They don't want to hear us, man.
Look,
what's your deal?
They have an entire network television program committed to them with the ESPN, so they don't need to hear us talk about it because ESPN talks about them 24/7.
You know what? That's probably pretty fair. And they probably associate us with like other national media just coming after us, not really knowing the team. It's like, hey, I spent my entire damn morning and last night getting ready for
4
this.
4 o'clock this morning to watch Deshaun Watson throw one hoppers and skip rocks across the pond. Okay.
And thank you for coming to today's episode.
We're going to talk about Deshaun in Section 3.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about the offense first. I got the depth chart up for anybody who's on YouTube, so I'll go ahead and pop it up. And, Joe, we're going to start offensively besides the fact that this offensive line is awesome.
Yeah, let's start there, man. Especially the middle. Bitonio, Wyatt Teller are absolute studs at guard, but how about Ethan Pocic in the revelation that he was
is that how you say
for them? You know, Kyle, the best thing about this is that he's turned out to be a quality player, and he signed a contract extension, and I have to be challenged with saying his name.
But they are who we thought they were. This is
my first interview I've ever done with a player in person was Ethan Pocic. And before the interview, I looked at him and I said, Ethan, how do I say your last name? And he told me how to say his last name. 3, 2, 1, time to record, and I did not say it the way that he told me to. And do I remember how I'm supposed to say it? Yeah. No. But I've been going with Ethan Pocic. So it's great to welcome the pronunciation police right here in the first few minutes of the podcast.
Welcome.
The best part is you can know that I've spoke to the man personally on how to say it. I tried my best. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. But he's a stud.
The interior trio was awesome. And, kind of fell into this opportunity, right?
Yeah.
It was original. Their plan was Nick Harris, maybe not last year, but, Nick Harris got brought in and was going to get a run there to be the starter, and he got hurt. And it facilitated this kind of instability at the center position, so they go get Ethan Pocic, and he ends up being really, really good. Now, life's pretty good when you got Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller on either side of you, I'm sure. But that isn't to take anything away from what he was able to provide for Cleveland up front. It was pretty good.
This is the sidebar you never knew you needed. But between Ethan Pochik and Connor Williams and Mitch Morse and Joe Tippmann and Frank Ragnow, is there a movement for the big center? Like, is this a thing? Like the 6'5", 310-pound center? Is this a thing? It feels like we have some momentum here for some bigger centers out there, man.
Right? There's value to athletes who also have power at the point of attack. And I think that's what all those players have in common, is that they all have an ability to win against nose tackles while simultaneously having the range to be an impactful second-level defender if you're uncovered on the defensive front.
What do we think about Jedrick Wills, the left tackle? It's been okay, right?
I'm glad you got somebody in the pipeline to not get handcuffed there. They made the reinvestment in Conklin, right? They gave Conklin a new contract.
Yeah.
Teller and Bitonio are under contract.
Pochik too?
I don't think you can justify, like, Jedrick Wills is probably going to get in free agency as an adequate level starting left tackle. How many $1 million a season?
10, 12.
Can they afford that?
They shouldn't. They shouldn't want to pay all four.
The opportunity cost of signing him feels like you're losing better players to just retain the chemistry of your offensive line, especially because you drafted DeJuan Jones in the 4th round. And let's hope that's a good environment for him. And let's hope he can live up to his physical potential, because if he does, I'd much rather have the player with plenty of talent on a rookie contract than make a new investment in Jedrick Wills and then potentially lose the opportunity to upgrade somewhere else along this roster.
How about these weapons? I mean, I think Amari Cooper's so good. Every time I watch Amari Cooper, man, like I don't get it. I don't know how this guy's been on like 3 different teams at this point in his career. He's a great football player. The route running, the hands, the body control. He's not limited in any way. I think that's the best way I'd put it. He's above average in everything across the board. He's productive. He's been productive with multiple quarterbacks.
And he's one of the most technically proficient receivers in football.
Oh man, I would jump if I were a team that had a chance to get Amari Cooper. I'd jump at the chance to do it. I think he's an absolute.
Remember when he got traded for a 5th?
Brother, I can't reconcile that to save my life. I cannot. Great move by the Browns.
He was owed $20 million. That's all.
Well, as I'm watching them this morning, I'm thinking to myself, man, what if they didn't get Amari Cooper? Like, because they had some issues there at receiver for a while. It's like, man, how do you stumble into that? That's a great move to have him. He's so good. But also, I'm intrigued with Elijah Moore coming over. I think we all are. Flashy production with the Jets, but between whatever was going on with the rift he had with the coaching staff, bad quarterback play for 2 years, I think there's a lot more ceiling for him to unlock. Donovan Peoples-Jones went out and had like 800 yards last year. There's some depth here. Marquise Goodwin, a veteran. Cedric Tillman, a recent draft pick from this past year, who's got a lot of ability. See if they can get something from Jakeem Grant, who they gave a 3-year contract to, and coming off an Achilles injury. David Bell. Yeah, there's options here, and maybe Hop's on the way, right?
Yeah,
maybe Hop's on the way. This is
they should go out and get DeAndre Hopkins.
I think so too. Yeah,
I think this is a team where you probably get them on a 1-year deal, right? But if you get past the first waves of free agency and you add Za'Darius Smith and DeAndre Hopkins to this nucleus that you have,
yeah, I think that would mean a lot for Deshaun, right? We're going to get to Deshaun, but like a player like that, to give him some familiarity, a guy who's thrown a lot of footballs too, it'd be a high priority for me if I were Cleveland.
And I don't think that DeAndre Hopkins' potential hypothetical arrival takes anything away from Elijah Moore.
No.
I think that those reps probably come at the cost of Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's a good player. Right. We both graded him as an adequate level starter. I loved him coming out of Michigan. I had like a 2nd-round grade on him coming out of Michigan.
Still really young, too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, there is some long-term there, but you'd certainly like to think that a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, for these young receivers like Cedric Tillman and Elijah Moore and David Bell and Donovan Peoples-Jones, like, they would benefit from having Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins as 2 really good route runners. And Nuke has made so much of his killing on option routes, working from the slot, kind of identifying post-snap, and kind of those football instincts of Cooper and his route running and stems to make everything look the same until it's not. And DeAndre Hopkins with pre-snap or post-snap processing to be able to identify coverage leverage and build chemistry and kind of be the translator, if you will, between Deshaun Watson and a lot of these young guys. I think there's a great opportunity there for that entire wide receiver room to get better long-term, not just what DeAndre Hopkins would bring in a one-year situation.
David Njoku's an awesome young tight end. Good depth
being
there.
Surprised that Njoku's good.
No, that was a good. You had that one before he was eligible at Miami. You were at a game. I remember that text. Like,
yeah,
they got a transformer.
Over Pittsburgh Panther defender into the end zone on the goal on the pylon I was standing right at. It was incredible.
Nick Chubb, best pure running back in the NFL,
Yes.
in my opinion. He's an absolute stud. I am here, though, for the Jerome Ford breakout this year. I mean, Kareem Hunt's no longer part of this football team. He touches the ball a fair amount of times, around 175 times a year. That's got to go to somebody. I think Jerome Ford is a fourth-round pick, could be a little bit of a sleeper here as a guy that can get some run in this backfield.
Yeah, there's a part of me that would love to just let Nick Chubb cook, right? There's a part of me that wants him to have the Ricky Williams season and just give Nick Chubb 400 touches and see what it looks like.
God, does he make it through 400 touches?
Probably not. I think that's the logical side of it, is to say, okay, they've done well to manage Nick Chubb, to keep him fresh. It's that tightrope that you have to walk, and I get it. But if I'm looking at the names behind Nick Chubb, and it's Felton and Kelly and Ford, and I agree with you, I like Jerome Ford at Cincinnati too. Isn't there a little bit of motivation to maybe give a third of those open snaps to Nick Chubb?
I don't know. If you're gonna make it to the playoffs and be meaningful in the playoffs, if you're Cleveland, Nick Chubb's going to be a big part of that. And so I'd want to cap him around 300 touches and make sure that I have that to lean on when I need it the most late in the season in the playoffs.
How about if we buy into a true, and you know, they did this with Kareem Hunt too, but like there's a true third down back. Nick Chubb's not taking pass pro on third down.
Well, then I might want a different player than Jerome Ford.
John Kelly? Felton is a scout.
I'll never quit John Kelly. I'll never quit him. What a fun player, man.
This is
Tennessee.
Their backfield is a bunch of brand guys for us.
Right.
I think Felton's the only one neither one of us like really went to bat for.
He can go. Bring back the Ernest Johnson. Swap him out for Demetric Felton. But
as far as skill groups go, though, obviously the unproven dynamic of Tillman and Moore and Bell kind of leaves you with some variance on what that outcome is going to look like. I think that's why we're both proponents of like, hey, go get DeAndre Hopkins and be done. But Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Nick Chubb, what a trio of pillars.
Yeah. That,
you know, you can run your offense through either throwing the ball or rushing the football. And of course, with this offensive line, you imagine they are going to have a lot of opportunities to dictate terms and run downhill and play action pass off of that and use both Njoku and Cooper as guys that'll cut you up. And a lot of the success of this team as a whole is going to come back to Deshaun Watson, which is why, as you can see on the YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, the unparalleled, this is what, year 8, year 7 for Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, it's a weird situation.
17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 7. Draft dudes do math. The year 7 incomplete evaluation player. The first in its history in the 2 years that we've been doing this exercise of grading rosters. So we'll talk about Deshaun here in segment 2. But, Joe, we got to get ready to flip over to the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, before we do that, let's talk about Birddogs. I absolutely love their shorts and joggers. Just got a couple of pairs of their shorts yesterday, and they are awesome. They make you look good. They have this design. It's like this stretch khaki design. They're made to fit slimmer through your thigh and your leg to give you that sculpted look. It fits so much better than like a regular pair of shorts. They don't have that stiff, restricting cotton type fabric. I mean, Birddogs has fixed that problem by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so that you can get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. And they use this anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool all day long. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL. Enter promo code LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. Here it is. It's awesome with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you.
So defensively, really excited about the addition of Za'Darius Smith to this group for the Cleveland Browns, because they also low-key added Dalvin Tomlinson to the defensive front this offseason.
Yeah.
And when you watch the Browns on tape last year, the front had its rear end handed to it itself quite a few times. Defensive tackle play, lack of stout anchors, kind of guys not reacting to blocks, running themselves out of plays, getting bubbled back into your linebackers, falling back into your lap. Deion Jones, who was here last year, didn't know which way was up at times, it seemed like, kind of chasing his own tail out there. They were a mess in the front. And you think about just the new additions, right? If you're only going to count the new additions, you have 2 rookies in Isaiah McGuire and Siaki Ika. You have Za'Darius Smith. You have Agbo Okoronkwo. You have Dalvin Tomlinson. This is a really good influx of talent to a defensive front that desperately needed it with how they played last year.
And I think, obviously, Dalvin Tomlinson is going to help with that. You're still really unsettled, though, at that other defensive tackle spot. You're hoping for something to materialize between Jordan Elliott, Tristan Hill, and Perrion Winfrey, and I don't like having eggs in that basket. I think it'd be nice if they had another guy there. Maybe Shelby Harris, give him a call, see what he's doing, bring him over. He knows Ethan Pocic, be helpful. Maybe he doesn't know Ethan Pocic because he was on Seattle last year and Pocic wasn't. But point being, go find yourself an upgrade at 3-tech if you can. But bringing in Za'Darius Smith is absolutely necessary without Jadeveon Clowney being back in the mix. And so is Agbo Okoronkwo. I think they needed both of those additions to stabilize the edge. They needed Dalvin Tomlinson. I still think they need a little bit more at defensive tackle, especially when your stack backers behind them are like Anthony Walker, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Those are guys that are lighter, right? They're more matchup-specific type players, and you want them to be able to run free. And it's going to be difficult for them with kind of this 3-tech situation and the lack of overall depth there at defensive tackle. Edge is a better situation with the arrival of Smith and Okoronkwo, but still concerned about defensive tackle.
Oh, and hopefully you can get a healthy season out of Anthony Walker. I certainly think that would help.
Yeah.
Missed about 4 games in 2021, and then in 2022 only played in 3 games, dressed in 3 games. So that is a player who, for me, I think has a little bit of a different demeanor and play style that can kind of help with if you're not anchoring up front with consistency, but he's got to be available and obviously missed the time last year, and that really hurt after a 3-year stint as a starting linebacker in Indianapolis when he was highly productive each of those 3 seasons. So Anthony Walker is kind of a guy I've got a gold star next to for this Cleveland Browns front that you can hope is back to what he's shown he's capable of being, because I think it would give a totally different flavor into a linebacker room in Cleveland that otherwise has a lot of guys who are not stout strikers and are a little bit more space players.
I'm a big fan of this secondary. I really like it, especially at corner. Denzel Ward, a franchise cornerstone. Greg Newsome, who's been really good. I mean, he doesn't have an interception, but my goodness, he has everything else. He's looked really good through 2 seasons. And then Martin Emerson. I mean, how good was that guy last year with the kind of tone-setting demeanor that he brought to the table, physical, like very confident player, just really easy to root for. So you have those as your top 3 corners to go with. Grant Delpit, who I think has become at least a sufficient starter. Rodney McLeod's been a very good veteran player in the league for a long time, and you brought over Juan Thornhill, who I think is a really good split zone type safety, one high guy even at times. So I think this starting secondary and even the depth when you consider McCoy at safety, I like it. I think it's really good. And if you can get this pass rush going, which should be the strength of your front, you would think, I think the defense will have a lot better results this coming year.
I can't believe Rodney McLeod's on his 3rd team in 3 years.
It's veteran safeties are always extremely weird, man, with how the league treats them.
Just a really sturdy player last year in Indianapolis. He's been consistently good, like going back to his 3-year stint when he was a volume starter for the Eagles prior to the injury that he took in 2018. He was really productive against the pass, like really consistent. And he's played like last year for the Colts, he played like 200 snaps on special teams too. He logged over 1,200 snaps last year for the Colts. And yeah, I mean, veteran safety, 32 years old, I get it, but at the same time, I really don't get it. I think that's a great add, and I think a little bit more of a stabilizing player in coverage than Delpit. I think in between Juan Thornhill and McLeod, if you want to go sub-package and have Usu Koromoa and have Delpit as kind of the a guy who can buzz around the line of scrimmage a little bit, kind of get involved in the run fits, you can do some really nice big nickel stuff with this trio, so long as the front holds up and prevents opposing running offenses from getting vertical quickly on top of you. As long as they can do that, I think they have a really nice makeup on the back end in the safety room to stay versatile and multiple.
We should probably also acknowledge the arrival of Jim Schwartz as a defensive coordinator. I've always been a Jim Schwartz fan. Get ready for some wide nines. That feels pretty disastrous for offensive tackles that have to deal with a freak like Myles Garrett. You know, we didn't even get into Myles Garrett. It's like an assumed part of this. Like, he's one of the best defensive linemen in the league, like a true franchise cornerstone. But we've seen Jim Schwartz generate a lot of sack production, and he's got some guys up front to unleash. I'm excited to see how it happens.
And McLeod had a lot of ball production playing in the secondary for Schwartz in Philadelphia when they overlapped in 19 and 20, as you know, McLeod is a starter. So I think the Schwartz defense with that wide nine front, I think it will put some more stress on the interior of the box. So Dalvin Tomlinson's a huge presence there, but the depth and that other spot. Oh, you had mentioned, who'd you mention?
Shelby Harris,
Ioannidis.
Yeah, go get him.
Akeem Hicks.
Yes, these are the players you should be
These are the guys, right?
Yes,
like,
you're there. Go get them.
As long as DeAndre Hopkins doesn't prevent you from getting those kinds of guys, go get them both, right? Yeah. You're going to be highly competitive. You're trying to chase down the Cincinnati Bengals. Pittsburgh's going to be improved with their second-year quarterback. Baltimore kind of reshaping their entire offense. This is a highly competitive division.
Man, they got $15 million in space right now. I'm signing Hop in one of those defensive tackles, and we're going to go make a run here in the North.
Yeah, and I think you can if the quarterback play comes together. Of course, the mystery is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we've kind of made the commitment to having such a nuanced conversation around Deshaun Watson and carved out segment 3 to keep buried here. But I'll pull the depth chart back up here as we look at, a good amount of cornerstones, a healthy amount of cornerstone players between Ward and Garrett and Bitonio and Teller and Chubb and Cooper and quality starters elsewhere on this roster. There's a lot to like here. This is going to be a good team. But the competitiveness of the division kind of puts you on the spot where the critical component and the X factor being Deshaun Watson is ultimately going to determine your season. And Watson, I don't think the record and the statistics are necessarily an accurate indicator of where this team is or what the play was like last year. I even think 58% completion, 6.5 yards per attempt, and a 7-5 touchdown interception ratio probably is not indicative of just how bad it was at times and how out of sync and disjointed the offense looked. And look, you understand that. He missed almost 2 seasons worth of play as a starter. But what we're going to get into here on segment 3 is going to be committed to where it was off, how it can get back on track, and just kind of our general thoughts, because it was impossible to put him in a bucket. And we'll talk about that here to close on this episode of Locked On NFL Scout. So, Joe, here's the deal. If we were to put Deshaun Watson in a bucket in 2020, roster cornerstone, right?
Oh, 2020. Yeah. He was one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the league in 2020. There's no question.
4,800 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 8.9 yards per attempt. Still had a high sack total, but even amidst taking 49 sacks that season, his adjusted net yards per attempt was 8.22. Magical season that year. Now, of course, everything that happened between then and now happened. And Deshaun Watson took time away from the game as consequences for the conduct off the field. And that's putting it mildly and lightly, right? But then he served a suspension. He came back and he started the last 6 games of the year. And he put up the numbers that we kind of alluded to. And I think the scariest thing for Cleveland is not knowing where on the spectrum of what he was in 2020 and where he was when he came back. Like, he could fall anywhere in between there. And when you paid the price that you paid for that to happen, it needs to be a lot closer to 2020, and you don't really know how long it is or is not going to take for him to fully regain his footing as an NFL quarterback.
Perhaps the most discouraging part of Deshaun Watson last year, nobody's going to say he played well. He was a train wreck out there. No confidence, no accuracy, no feel. It was a disaster. But even across 6 starts and 170 passing attempts, I didn't see growth there, right? I thought at some point you would feel like you're watching some piece of what you remember about Deshaun Watson. And even in the 3 touchdown performance against Washington, I mean, he was 9 of 18. And he had 3 pretty easy touchdown passes, one, a couple to Cooper, one where Cooper was able to spin outside against a poor leveraged corner. One, Cooper was wide open. The other one, I think, was Donovan Peoples-Jones was wide open. I mean, these weren't hard moments. And we didn't have those 3 touchdowns. And we're talking about 4 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in 6 games with no growth to show for it. It's not like you're playing these great teams down the stretch. I mean, New Orleans, Washington, Pittsburgh, that was your second 3 games after Houston, Cincinnati, and Baltimore. And so it's tough to watch. And, they made a huge commitment, right? It's a fully guaranteed contract, 5 years, $230 million. And so this is the course that they're going to be married to for a while here. And it's really impossible to know what he's going to look like. I mean, didn't play at all in 2021, 6 starts in 2022, and they were disastrous. I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen Deshaun Watson play high-level football. There's excuses, right? There's things that you can lean into and convince yourself that, well, I mean, it was always a tough environment, and he's going to be more equipped. He's going to be better positioned to play good football this coming season. But man, this is one of those things that I'm going to have to see to believe that Deshaun Watson can get back to what we saw in 2020.
When I think the feel will be better. It can't be worse than what it was. And now he has the full off season, and he's not going to have a 3-month limbo where he's going to practice with the team and then be away from the team, and everybody's going to have been playing in that window, and you're trying to step in when you're so far behind. So, like, if we're being completely objective, I understand why it was a struggle through all the context, but predicting outcomes of what it's going to look like now is almost impossible, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's what inspires me to say, go get Hop. Give him something that he knows. I mean, we both watched the tape on Hop when the rumbling started, I think back in like March, and we did an episode on him, and we both came away feeling pretty good about the player that he still is and how he can help a football team. And I think the presence of Amari Cooper and Nick Chubb and David Njoku and Elijah Moore is a great place for him to be able to come in and be a piece, but also give Deshaun something stabilizing. I think you've seen that from a lot of teams. A lot of it's been reuniting college quarterbacks with college receivers.
Right.
Like we've seen that, and we've seen that work. And I would want to do the same for Deshaun. I know it's a unique situation, but if I got that invested in Deshaun, I take advantage of this opportunity to sign Hop if I can.
So I have a question for you. You know how many times Jacoby Brissett was sacked last year?
I don't.
24 times, 11 starts.
Mm-hmm.
You know how many times Deshaun Watson was sacked in 6 starts?
Probably a lot.
20.
Yeah. Deshaun's he gets sacked a lot. It's just who he is as a player.
And that's where I was going is amidst all of this discussion of feel and chemistry being better, at the end of the day, across Deshaun Watson's entire career, 9.2% of his dropbacks have ended in sacks.
Yeah.
Took 62 sacks in 2018, 44, 49, missed 2021, and then in 2022 in 6 games was sacked on 10.5% of his dropbacks. The only quarterbacks last year with more than 100 attempts who had a higher sack percentage than Deshaun Watson were Sam Ehlinger, and he had 101 attempts, and Justin Fields, 14%.
His average time to throw is 3.31, man. And we spend years.
That's who he's been, too.
Yeah, like we've always been like, Houston, you got to get the offensive line, give Deshaun a chance. Like, Deshaun's got to give himself a chance.
Well, and there's a whole discussion with a lot of teams across the league with the quality of the offensive line and the narrative of the protection being better. Responsibility oftentimes for quarterbacks in pass protection falls on themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And for Deshaun Watson, having the offensive line that you have, having the running game that you have, walking that tightrope more effectively is probably something like we need to be willing to take some L's on individual plays for the big picture of seeing the forest for the trees, right? And 9.2%. I mean, Deshaun Watson for his career, he has almost 2,000 attempts, and he's been sacked 194 times. This was not, Cleveland came in. Case in point, Jacoby Brissett was sacked on 6% of his dropbacks last year.
That foil is very significant.
And I don't think no matter how better Deshaun gets in getting back into the swing of the offense, that number's always going to be high. It's never been less than 8.2 in a single season. So in an offense that has Nick Chubb and has the offensive line that you have, that's the part for Kevin Stefanski, and I think that's the part that's fascinating is you brought this quarterback in and you're paying this quarterback what you're paying him to be the player that he was in 2020, but so much of her roster is constructed to when you're going to be your most efficient, it's not going to be playing that kind of football, right?
Especially, and I wish I had the data here, and maybe it's easy to find, and I just don't know where to get it, but the yards lost on Deshaun Watson sacks are pretty significant, right? Like, you talked about him getting sacked 20 times in 6 starts, but just think about the bad situations that puts the offense in general. And it's already hard for you, and you're making it harder. I can think of in the game, I watched 3 of his starts this morning, and I can think about some of those sacks, and just the down and distance became impossible for that offense to get out of, except for the one friggin' play. I think it was a 3rd and 30, the throw to Amari Cooper that wound up being a touchdown. But yeah, for the most part, it's hard to get out of those situations.
So Deshaun lost in total 106 yards on those 20 sacks.
I don't know what a normal amount of yards lost per sack is on average. I don't know what that is, but
well, I mean some of that comes into why we like net yards per attempt, right?
Yes.
Because that reduces sack yards.
Yeah.
So if you were to filter adjusted net yards per attempt, quarterbacks with more than 100 pass attempts who had a lower adjusted net yards per attempt than Deshaun Watson's 5.24, and that's a low number. Justin Fields, 5.05. Joe Flacco, 4.90. Colt McCoy, 4.71. Skylar Thompson, 4.45. I was told anybody could run that offense with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Turns out Skylar Thompson.
I watched Skylar Thompson damn near beat the Bills in the playoffs, man. It's something I witnessed.
And Sam Ehlinger, 4.23.
That's not the company you want to be in, man.
Right. From an adjusted net yards per attempt standpoint, factoring in sacks, negative plays, throwaways, all that kind of stuff, those are the quarterbacks with 100 attempts or more that had a lower adjusted net yards per attempt than Deshaun Watson last year. Yeah. And that's why he's pink, right? Because the resume of, and pink is the color code that we use for incomplete evaluation if you're not on YouTube. you got no clue. And other than the year in 2020, like 2020, his adjusted net yards per completion was over 8. It was like 8.2. And leaders last year, Pat Mahomes last year had a 7.51 adjusted net yards per attempt. So Deshaun Watson, 3/4 of a yard higher than that back in 2020. So when the polls are that extreme and he missed the amount of time that he missed, we didn't feel right putting him anywhere other than pink. It's just going to be impossible to know exactly where this is going to play until probably middle of October.
An impossible team to predict. We like the rest of what you got. We just have no idea how good your quarterback is.
Right.
But the good news is your quarterback has proven for multiple years to be one of the best in the league. It's been a while.
So we'll see. Fascinating team. Fun team to study. Some really good players. But a grand chemistry experiment that the Browns are going to have to see through. And you're hoping that with what they've brought in and what they may continue to bring in, it can expedite getting Deshaun Watson back to whatever his new floor and pushing for his ceiling is going to be.
The Browns get better? I think they did. I think it's a better roster. Yeah, it's a better roster right now than coming out of 2022.
I think they're comfortably a better roster between the defensive line additions, Elijah Moore.
Yep.
Hopefully Deshaun Watson elevating his play.
Kind of remade safety room.
Even in the secondary.
Yeah.
I think this is comfortably better football team. So that's one thing for sure the Browns have going for them. And we hope you enjoyed this conversation on the Cleveland Browns. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. We are the Draft Dudes, and we are out of here. Appreciate our everydayers who are locked in with us on a daily basis here on the Locked On Network. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Make it a great rest of your day. We'll be back to talk to you all again tomorrow. Peace.